Welcome to the Aural Apothecary Podcast, authentic chat about medicines, pharmacy and healthcare in the UK.
Pharmacists Jamie, Gimmo and STC take on topical and controversial stories, but keep it edgy yet light-hearted.
Guests share their career-defining drug, song and book, and also share their joyful patient stories. Welcome to the Aural Apothecary Podcast. My name is Jamie Hayes. It's our almanac for 2024. Time for some reflection and a festive drink at the end of another year. We time travel for our micro-discussion as we head back to 1964 and explore patients' views of their admissions to a London teaching hospital. The paper gives the results of a medical and social survey of a small group of patients admitted into the beds of King's College Hospital in 1962 and 1963. It was designed to provide some facts about the effects of admission on patients from their point of view. Imagine that. To help us look back over the last year, we're joined in the Aural Apothecary Arms by Honorary Apothecaries, winning her 7th cap, I think. It's the 4th Apothecary, Clare Howard, and gaining his 4th cap, it's Apothecary number 5, Jonathan Underhill. Look, let's see what do they say about them. Clare's style is conversational with just the right amount of sass, like a friendly pharmacist and a stand-up comedian took a writing class together. Jonathan serves up a fine blend of sarcasm and sage advice, ensuring we remember that medicine isn't just about prescriptions. It's about people and their choices, and occasionally gently mocking the system. Let's welcome my 4 fellow apothecaries. STC is in Bournemouth, Gimmo's in Cardiff, Clare is in Newbury, Jonathan is in Cheshire. Welcome all.
Evening. So I thought we weren't inviting Jonathan anymore onto the pod.
Do you remember when we talked about pedultery before?
Yeah, we're soaring like an eagle.
Nah, joking aside, Jonathan, for those who wonder what we're on about, Jonathan set up, or has been part of a podcast that he set up, and actually, to be fair, it's very good.
It is very good. We shouted it out several times already.
Well, again, and the antidepressant episode should be repeated again today, because it's all over the news again, antidepressants and the issues with those.
Well, thank you so much. It's called Talking Meds. That'll be the last time I mention it tonight. And all I will say is that I stand on the shoulder of giants.
And you pinch their guests.
Of course I do.
And talking of which, Clare, would you like to get a word in?
Well, I suppose I did commit adultery because I've been on your podcast and I did also go on Jonathan's. So, I feel... but I couldn't say...
Was that adultery or podultery? Yeah. I don't know what you said there. Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. Yeah. So we don't have to go through divorce proceedings. Jonathan, you're still very welcome on this show anytime you like.
Thank you very much.
Steve, what was your roast that you just discovered? Go on.
You mean now that we've all moved to Blue Sky? I think we've all moved to Blue Sky now, haven't we?
We have.
Can we trash Trump? Not Trump. Well, I can trash Trump as well if you like, but we can trash Musk now, right? I blocked Musk some months ago on X, and I thought that would do it, but it clearly didn't.
That'll learn him.
That's when he started to get bitter.
That's when he got a bit stroppy, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So,
Jamie, have you still got your Tesla?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
A man of no principles. Yeah, a man of no principles.
I've got a new one coming next week. Sorry.
It says. He doesn't just listen, he critiques and promotes podcasts like a true aficionado, mixing humour with healthcare insights. His self-deprecating humour and candid thoughts make even his bombed arrival on the site relatable, like that awkward first date that turned into a lifelong friendship.
And mine reads The Mysterious Chemist, Unravelling the Secrets of Health Podcasting. A chemist turned podcaster whose content is as potent as their enthusiasm. A curious blend of intellect and charm, leaving us eager for their next dose of wisdom.
Wow. And you don't even post. You only ever repost. You've never posted anything on Twitter yourself.
Where's that coming from? Gimmo, have you done one?
No, I haven't. I didn't get the brief. I haven't done it.
Oh.
But you're not on Blue Sky yet, Gimmo, are you?
Yeah, I have, but I haven't posted anything on there, so...
Oh, okay.
So I'll have a look later.
You're still causing trouble on X because of the police state that we live in.
Yeah, that's right.
So around the room, what are you drinking? Claire, what are you drinking?
An Australian Chardonnay.
Jonathan?
I've got a Northumbrian gin and tonic.
Gimmo?
I got a red wine that I bought for £5.49 from Aldi on the recommendation of someone on Instagram. I actually went to the shop to buy it because he said it was 20 miles down the road from Chateauneuf to Pap Country, and it was as good as. And I got to say, it's very good. I think it's called Carry-Ann, but I might be wrong on that.
Fisher? No, I'm drinking Brewdog. Do you remember last year on the Almanac, what were Gimmo and I drinking?
Oh,
that gentian stuff.
Gentian Violet. No,
Gabba
Gabacentia. Gabacentia. Professor David Nutt, yeah.
Okay.
Jamie, what are you drinking?
Jamie gave me a bottle of that. It's still in the fridge.
Oh,
Oh,
I
it's you.
re-gifted
no.
it.
He said he'd re-gifted it.
Yeah, so that came direct from me.
You tried some when you were down here as well, didn't you, Jonathan? Yeah, and then he took another bottle away with
Yes.
him. There we are.
Yes.
Well, it's
Yeah.
better than putting it in the bath like you did the first bottle.
I'm drinking ginger beer.
Oh,
there we go.
Okay. Have you got a sore throat, love?
They didn't have any strawberry blonde in stock.
Oh.
Is that non-alcoholic ginger beer?
That's my first Christmas gag.
Very good.
Yeah, it's an in-jack.
Okay, what are we looking for? Reflections of 2024. A reflection on another busy year. Who would like to kick things off?
Go on, Claire. Ladies first.
Oh, how nice. So I think really, really busy year because I was doing the repeat prescribing toolkit with the RCGP and RPS. So I'm pleased that was out. Pleased it didn't cause a furore. Kind of relieved it's out there. But I think probably the most impactful thing that happened was, we work really hard on the Polypharmacy action learning sets, and they're enormously they take a lot of energy, and Steve will kind of back me up that I wrestle a lot with, are we still doing something useful? Is this helpful? But for our 1,000th delegate, we recorded a GP, and the recording, actually, when I heard it the first time, I'll be honest, I sat in my little shed here and it brought a tear to my eye, because she said something along the lines of she'd been a GP for 9 years, a doctor for 15 years, and she hadn't realised how much in the rut of drug, condition X, I just prescribe drug Y and I don't engage my brain any further than that. And the course had helped her to really think about, not only does she need to rethink that, she needs to unpick some of that prescribing. And I think just hearing that impact that something that you work really hard on has on a very busy clinician, it just really sort of blew me away. And I think probably gave me a bit of a shot in the arm to keep that work going, even though it is exhausting to kind of keep it going. We are doing something meaningful, and when you hit that spot, you kind of have a responsibility to sort of keep it going. And so, yeah, I think that was probably the most work emotional moment that I've had this year.
And that's fantastic achievement. That's incredible. And like what you're part of is what's happened over the last couple of years is a sort of paradigm shift around polypharmacy and deprescribing or whatever term. And so it is gradual, isn't it? And it's a sort of, it's the sort of thing that you'll only notice in 5 years when you look back. But I think we are, when we think about our attitude towards drugs and polypharmacy in particular, it has shifted in the last 10 years. And these are a big part of that.
I hope so. And yeah, the first couple of courses we ran 5 years ago, we had people coming with their arms folded going, well, I don't believe in all this. I don't believe in shared decision making. And nobody says that now. So it has shifted. But I think it's important that we keep going, because there's a lot of people still, need that support. It's complex, it's tricky. And I think what we are doing is hopefully helping to nudge the dial a little bit. So I think that was my reflection.
Good. I don't want to bring a tear to your eye, but I listened to the last 3 almanacs that we did. And last year, of course, your year was very different. And you did say about the loss of your dad, and you did say that it had actually spurred you on even more. So that's great, example of that extra spur that you took from your dad's loss. So, and I say, those of us that work with you all the time, it's been fascinating, and so, as you say, impactful, and hopefully it will continue. Jonathan's very much part of it as well, and obviously Zoe and Amy and Lawrence Brad. So yeah, it's a good thing, isn't it, Jonathan? We enjoy it.
It's fantastic. It's certainly one of the things that I most enjoy about working now. And I think the other thing, Claire, if it doesn't continue, and I really, really hope it does, but if it doesn't, people will miss it. And it's a bit like when we worked at the National Prescribing Centre, and that went. And then about 2 or 3 years later, people went, oh, we really missed that. I wish we had that back.
Still do.
And I worry that that's going to happen with the National Polypharmacy.
It's not, is it, Claire? We're not going to let that happen, are we?
No, I'm not.
Absolutely not.
Exactly. Good. That's a good positive one to start on. Excellent.
Go on then, Jonathan, you as a guest.
So 2024 has been quite an interesting year for me, let's say. And I suspect I will look back on 2024 with a mixture of emotions. I left NICE after 10 years at working for NICE, and then 20 years previously at the National Prescribing Centre. It wasn't something that I'd actively pursued, but when the when the offer was made to me, I thought about it for about an hour and went, yes, please, I'll do that. So I left at the end of May. I knew it was happening for about 3 months and had made some sort of provisional inquiries to people like Clare and to Carol Roberts at Prescrip and other places about, what are the chances of me
Guess
getting
a job.
We went for a walk in Ludlow, didn't we, Jonathan?
We went for a work in Ludlow, Jamie, we did, which was very helpful. And it just gives you a sense of what's important to you. And I have to say, since I left NICE at the end of May, I've absolutely loved it. I'm now doing work that I really enjoy. Looking back, I think some of the work at NICE was getting to me a bit, and it was affecting my mood and the way I was behaving with other people that I love, and that's not a good thing. It's never a good thing. But since then, I think I've just been a very different person. So yes, it's been an interesting year for me. My son, who's 29, went travelling as well at the end of May with his girlfriend, as was. They went travelling around North and South America. Came back with his fiancée because he proposed to her when they were away, and she said yes, and that was lovely. And I went out to meet them in Canada, so that was really nice. They're now back and full of the joys of life and planning their engagement party and planning their life together. That's really good. My daughter is a pharmacist, as you all know. She's now a band 7 ITU pharmacist at Chelsea Westminster and is enjoying life in London.
The Royal WC, excellent.
Yes, indeed. Which is where I worked about 35 years ago as well. So that's luckily there's nobody there from when I was there.
Oh, those London years, they were interesting.
Yeah, indeed. I think my other reflection on 2024 is, and I know it's been a difficult time for them, but a new government in situ. I think, again, inevitably there's been a bit of a downer on them in the last few weeks, but I'm an eternal optimist. I think there's going to be a significant investment in the NHS in the next few years, and I'm looking forward to that, and I think we need to make the most of that.
Yeah, it will be interesting, won't it, with the change in government. And yeah, the problem is it can't come soon enough. That's the problem, isn't it? And so, yeah, they're talking about a 10-year plan, and it probably does need a 10-year plan. We've talked about it a lot, and we all agreed that, this point about it's broken, but it's not beaten. Well, it's not far off beaten, is it? And it's going to need some radical thinking. And radical thinking requires, let's be honest, pissing quite a few people off. And so that's going to be hard to get through, isn't it? But yeah, I'm sure. Well, I know you did, Jonathan, because we talked on a WhatsApp group. Did you all put into, those of us that work in England, did you put into the request for ideas for the 10-year plan? Do you know what I put in?
Go on.
The Aural Apothecary tonic.
You did, didn't you? Yeah, that's good.
And
Very
I put
good.
it in and I said, listen, this came from 10 patients and advocates who happened to come on a podcast about medicines and healthcare. Have a look at this. This is what they think.
So I'm an optimist, and voted Labour and always been left leaning. I've been a little bit disappointed by some of the things I'm hearing about the NHS and in the language and the rhetoric that's being used. I mean, I get why they're doing it, but the one thing that's worried me is bringing in some very old sort of ideas like league tables and performance management. And we go back to our episode with John Seddon, and we just know that sort of approach doesn't work. We've seen it with schools, we've seen it with hospitals. So I'm trying to be optimistic, and I was looking at what Starmer was saying today, and but I'm not feeling it at the moment. But it's early days. The jury's out. They were left with an absolute,
Mess.
wreck from the previous government. So it is going to be difficult. But league tables, that's sending massive alarm bells for me.
The other thing that might be a bit challenging is the assisted dying bill, and whether that monopolises all the planning that there's a lot needs to be done around older people's care, around palliative care, all of that. And you just can see that now gets a little bit sideswiped and a little bit taken over with this bill that, kind of has come right at the beginning. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
I might as well come in there because that was going to be my reflection. And so yeah, not a funny one, but I think the assisted dying bill is one of the most momentous bills that's happened in our lifetime, really. It moves the state into a position that it's never been in, and I found it really interesting because I probably started off pro, and my natural inclination is choice and personally, and we go back to what we were talking about earlier. When see my dad die and thinking I don't want that to happen to me, and pro-choice. But then I think one of the people who spoke about it very well is actually one of our guests, Professor Mark Tober. I don't know if you've seen his Twitter feed and his LinkedIn. I mean, obviously getting very emotional about it because he's a palliative care doctor, and he makes the case very well. Actually, the issue is that we've really got, and I think Wes Streeton said this, to be fair to him, the issue we've got to sort out is palliative care is in a shocking state in this country. We don't fund a hospice service.
It's not funded, is it?
We don't have a hospice service. The services in hospital is running on fumes, and that's what I'm saying. I'm sounding a bit like Wes Streeton now. I'm not criticising anyone involved in that. I just know from first-hand experience and seeing it that it's impossible. And so you can't bring assisted dying into that environment. And there is a pharmacy angle here that I hadn't really thought about, but we're going to be giving these people drugs to what is effectively commit suicide, and it's digoxin, diazepam, morphine, amitriptyline was one that was suggested, which just sounds horrendous. So I think it's a big one for us. It is a pharmacy, it is a medicines issue as much as anything. But yeah, sorry, John, you were going to come in.
I was just going to say that actually. So this is something which is unusual for me. I'm completely and utterly undecided about where I sit on this. I can hear both sides of the argument. Yep. And go, oh yeah, that's right. And then you hear the other side and you go, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Oh yeah. And if I was an MP, I would have no idea which way to vote here. So I think what it needs is a mature conversation.
And it was mature, wasn't it, to be fair?
It was, but I just wonder if it's now been passed as a bill. So that means something then needs to happen to make it into law. And we've still got the law courts and the House of Lords and the Second House that can modify things. And I'm sure we will come up with a sensible way forward. But I can't see how that's going to look at them. And just those things like you just described, Gimmo. What are you going to give people? For assisted dying. Some of the regimens that have been described sound horrific to me.
And they don't always work. And the public think it's like a really straightforward thing, but clinically, it's really complicated. And I just don't think the public, there's a lot of work to be done to get people to understand the complexity, as always with healthcare, the complexity of it all.
Here's something controversial, though. At least they didn't actually put it out to a referendum. Or do you think anyone think that a referendum would have been a better idea?
No, not at all. And I think it's too serious for that. And I think an interesting fact was when I was looking at just doing a bit of digging is actually some of the most momentous changes in law have come from these private members' bills, and so it's things like abolish slavery. I think hanging was another one. I think
same-sex marriage. I think
same-sex marriage was private members' bill. Yeah, and so it's
exactly.
So there is form here, and so they do tend to be. You think about those bills and they change society, and that's why I think this is a big one. Is I think it has the potential to sort of, put the state in a position it's never been in before since capital punishment.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. Again, this is rare for me not to have a view one way or the other, and I'm glad I didn't have to vote for it. I had lots of conversations about it. I know people who work in palliative care as well, and you're right. I'm sure that Mark must be. I hope he's having a holiday. That's all I'm going to say, because he worked very hard on putting across his point of view. So, like Jonathan, yeah, I could see both sides, and I'm glad that I didn't have to vote on it. But at least, as I say, it wasn't a referendum, and at least it sounds like it was a proper debate. So, if I'm honest, if it was going to go all the way, I probably would have gone to the euthanasic part of it because of that thing about expecting people to give it to themselves. But I realised that it's all very, very complicated. So yeah.
So my other reflection on a more cheery note was just a reminder that this was the year we did the live show in Chapter. Remember that, boys? So that was just a reflection in terms of when we started this podcast 4 years ago, was it? Never would have imagined we'd be stood up in front of a full house in an arts theatre doing a live show. So when I thought about it, I suddenly thought, at the time we were on a bit of an adrenaline rush, but actually looking back, that was an amazing achievement. So just a pat on the back for us three. And I'll take you back to a particular moment when the three of us were in the dressing room and then moving to behind the stage. I think we shared a moment there, didn't we, in terms of the nerves before we went out on stage. So that was a particular highlight for me.
Can I just say, it does deserve a pat on the back. I've watched you do, when I was in Bordeaux, I watched you do the one at EAHP, and I do not know how you've done those ones where it's at an event, there's a ton of noise, the way you kept it going, it is something to see. So you definitely do deserve a pat on the back. So I'm very, very impressed. I could not do what you guys do in those live events.
Thank you. And remember, the dear listener, before anyone else, everyone got into podcasting, we were doing this before the rest is politics, may I say. So they might have sold out the O2, but we did actually sell out a venue in Cardiff, and we'll take that all day long, won't we, James?
We will. That was one of my reflections as well. Go on, Jonathan, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, did you have a green room, and did you ask for sort of particular colour M&Ms in the green room, or was it weren't quite as starry as that, were you not?
We had the works. We had
a massive changing room, didn't we?
Dressing room, I think you call it, Steve. Dressing room. Yeah.
Well, I had my full garb on, didn't I?
With ensuite. Yeah. No, it was. And I got that as one of the highlights. Seeing sold out on the screens at Chapter Art Centre when you walk into the foyer. And there was other things on that evening. There were some big cinematic shows going on. But there was only one event that had sold out by the side of it. That was one of my reflections of the last year. Steve, what about you?
I've also got two, because one's about the podcast and one is about something else. So from a podcast point of view, we've actually slowed down a bit because we're all super busy, and so we're doing less episodes in a series and stuff. But the thing about podcasting is it's about going deep. You pick a subject and you listen and you want to go deep. And if you don't like the people who host it and the banter that goes on, that's perfectly fine. Nobody can be liked by everybody. So that's choice, isn't it? That's values and preferences, Jonathan, isn't it? And there are other very good podcasts about medicines that you can go and listen to. But I think we've started to get much braver about the breadth of kind of people that we're taking on. So take the John Seddon episode that's just come out if you've not listened to it. But the one I want to take you back to is Professor Bapu Jenner. And you might remember, those of you who listened since the very beginning, I was always talking about Freakonomics, wasn't I? The podcast stable. And I was a complete fanboy, wasn't I, when he came on? And, fascinating guy, really lovely. He's a physician and an economist. And I listened back again to it today when I was cycling to work. And it was such a joy. And let's be honest, he'd done very little preparation. But actually, he was so natural. And I use the word natural because he talks about this idea of natural experiments. So if you haven't listened to the episode, please go back and listen to it. It's episode 7.2. And gosh, we covered so much stuff, about the differences between US and UK healthcare. I took him on about some of that and he wasn't having it. We talked about polypharmacy and he was sort of saying, oh, well, I'm not really having that, And he said, we need more healthcare, not less healthcare. And his book and Jamie, it was a classic at the end when
I landed one of them.
You landed a haymaker right at the end when you said, so what makes a good doctor? Would you see yourself? Because he only does several sessions a year. And so I just loved it, a proper fanboy. But actually, when I listened back, I thought, wow, we would never have chosen to do that. It's the breadth of what we're able to do now. So, yeah, it's been a great ride this year.
Very good. Look, here's one of my choices. Listen to this. Look, this is what we had this year.
They are the Apothecaries 3, Jamie, Gimmo and STC, to delight us all with their take on health, stories and anecdotes and fun facts as well. They keep it lighthearted, and the time it flies past as the guests tell their own tales and of course bring the class. When the guests are relaxed, it doesn't take long. They submit to the library a desert island drug, book and song. Will Jamie's Julian Tudor heart tale still go unannounced? Will Steve tell them off when a drug is mispronounced? Does poor Gimmo's dog still have all its legs as the cost of the vet bills amount to a Fabergé egg? So if you want a fun but informative listen, the Aural Apothecary, this is their mission.
There we go.
Wow.
So Anne-Marie, and again, one of my reflections was our trip to Bordeaux.
Yes.
which we were all at. Clare was keynote, which was a superb trip.
Well organised, Jonathan, as ever.
Yeah, and then meeting Anne-Marie on the plane on the way home, and then bouncing her onto the podcast, and then to come up with that, I thought was superb.
It was. What was your other reflection?
Absolutely brilliant.
My other reflection was our public show. That I had that down as well. I thought that was, and so I'm doing more and more with the public, but the chapter bit was a highlight for me, and it was different to some of the live shows as well, wasn't it? Because we did more content, I suppose, and so I'd love to get another one going of a similar method.
Shall I'll briefly say my other reflection was the county in which I now live and work in, Dorset, because, and I mentioned it on the last podcast, but not only did Dorset win the Health Service Journal Award for this year for prescribing medicines optimization, I also got highly commended in the PCPA awards as well around the same piece of work, which is about only order what you need, which was, £500,000 saved, 65,000 items not requested, 300 tons of greenhouse gas emissions prevented, and it was a piece of collaborative work between the community pharmacy fraternity, the general practice, and the ICB, and it was a joy to be part of. And also, not only that, but with Peter Cope at the Dorset ICB, we're also delivering some brilliant, dovetailing in beautifully with what Claire was talking about for the structured medication reviews for people on 10 plus medicines. We're doing some really cracking stuff in Dorset. We've got some great data because we've got a really, really good, I believe, Claire, isn't it, one of the best population health management systems in Dorset. So here's a couple of numbers, 13,000 people on 10 plus meds. There are 800,000 people in Dorset. And just to the first 6 months of this year, we've estimated that we've saved about 3,000 avoidable admissions to hospital. If you base that on the data, about 16% of medical admissions, that's in a year, 19,000 bed days per year, that would be. And all the 18 primary care networks have taken part. We've had 43% of people who had a review have had a reduction in their total number of medicines at 90 days. So they haven't gone back on them within 90 days. And we've estimated that we've saved another 300,000 from drug costs from doing that as well. So to the county of Dorset, I salute you.
Congratulations, that's a great project. Well done.
Great piece of work, and well done to Peter and the team, because to get all of that galvanised together, it just shows you when an ICB sort of take that role and pull it all together, what can be achieved. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Well done, Dorset.
And magnificent dancing on stage.
On stage,
Health Service Journal Awards as well, Steve. Everyone should be doing that when they win an award, shouldn't they? I would think.
I know.
But brilliant dancing, and well done to you all.
As you saw me introduce myself on Blue Sky, I was told I was the Alan Partridge of pharmacy, and then I said no, more of a David Brent with the dancing, and then Jonathan managed to link it together. So I made a very quiet start on Blue Sky.
Subtle, yeah.
It was subtle as a brick.
Subtle as always.
Subtle, just like you are, yeah.
So I've got another story of the year, which I think is worthy of a mention because I think it's medicines related, sorry. I think 2024 is the year of the weight loss drug. And so I think that's the year this is another thing that's going to potentially change society. So we know 1 in 4 people are obese, and we know the issue is we live in, and this is Margaret McCartney's words in an article I was reading, a obesogenic environment. And if we keep putting people in an obesogenic environment, then we're just going to increase the need for these drugs forever. One of the articles I read said that there have been 14 obesity strategies in the last 30 years. And so we can see how successful they've been. So I guess from a medicine's point of view, I would argue that's the most impactful medicine this year is obviously the 2 weight loss drugs. And I went on to one of the sites earlier just for the purpose of research. You can now get Wegovy for 110 quid a month if you buy it privately. And, I imagine it's not that hard to complete the questionnaire either. So we know in America they're starting to say it's changing how people are ordering food in restaurants. It's stopping people drinking. So I think 2024, I'm gonna call it as the year of the weight loss drugs.
Just a comment on my former colleagues at NICE and tirzepatide, which the draft guidance.
Mounjaro, isn't it, the trade name?
Well, yeah, that's right. So they announced the press release today. I think that it's going through consultation at the moment, and they're hoping to get it out in December. But with quite an interesting launch, if you like, where they're giving the NHS a period of time to implement the recommendations here, because they know the service isn't ready for this, which I actually think is a really quite sensible thing for NICE and NHS England to be doing. Because if they launched this now and said, you have to implement this guidance in 3 months, the NHS would just say, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So
or it would break
negotiation to say, you've got a period of time, up to 10 years perhaps, to fully implement.
I think it said 12, it didn't it, on the news this morning?
That's my point, 12. Isn't it? Is that 12 years as a recommendation? This is a drug. It's a generational shift, isn't it? There will be, over those 12 years, there will be a generational shift in how we think about obesity and manage it.
I have a colleague who runs a clinic, and she was saying, I hope the NHS don't just dump the drug into the system like it normally does. It's the support that goes with the drug to unpick why somebody has kind of got those issues with food in the first place. And if you don't unpick those, they come off the drug and they're back to square one. And she's done a huge amount of work, and I just hope the NHS has the chance to do it properly and well instead of
I don't think the NHS will be the place where this is going to happen. I think this is going to play out in the private market, I think, would be my view.
I think you might be right, Gimmo. So there's positives in that from NICE, but I have to say, just as a little bit of I hope they're thinking about this. It says in the guidance about explaining the risks and benefits to patients so people can make an informed decision on this. This is a preference-sensitive decision. What NICE haven't done, though, is illustrated the BRAN, the benefits, risks, alternatives and no treatments, in a way that clinicians can use in conversations with patients so patients can make an informed choice. I've had conversations with colleagues, and there is some work going on to produce something as an implementation pack that will include an illustration of the risks and benefits. So I think you have to do that, and NICE have to do that, possibly for everything they do, but just to be able to facilitate those conversations, those meaningful conversations with people. So,
well, as we always say on this podcast and many other places, don't we? We generally overestimate the benefits and we underestimate the risks. There's no doubt that the evidence in a controlled trial is phenomenal, in the amount of weight loss that you can get with these drugs. But guess what happens if you stop taking them? You put all that weight back on. So, and I've coming just myself across a number of patients who were on such drugs, and they just said, I feel miserable. I don't want to eat anything, and there's no enjoyment in going out. And I said to somebody actually recently, and I said, you do have a choice in this.
Well, within 12 years, it'll be off patent anyway, and so nobody will give a...
Yeah, I think you're right though, Kim. I think you've gone quite nicely there in relation to the whole year. Well, between you and Jonathan, you've got the changing government in this country, you've got the GLP-1, and you've got the assisted dying. I think you've nailed
just
the
throw
year
it together,
there.
Steve.
I know.
Big ticket items. Who's got another one for us?
I tell you what, there was a bombshell you dropped on me the last time we did the podcast, and that was that I wasn't the first choice to be your first guest. I've reflected an awful lot on that since I learned that bit of information.
I wasn't on that podcast, and I would have told you what I told you offline, which is that is not true, actually.
So did we find out who the first choice was?
Yeah, it was Berwyn. It was Berwyn. Yeah.
Oh, Berwyn.
That was almost pre-Steve when we were.
Yeah, I mean that's the point, isn't it? That is the.
Yeah. Well,
that
guess
goes
what?
back into the early days.
Guess what? It didn't happen, did it? Because there wasn't somebody to organise to get it actually done.
Yeah, that's it.
Right, are we into fun facts now?
Oh, let's do one of those.
Fun facts.
Yeah.
Go on, Claire.
So, I don't know whether it's a fun fact, but anyway, I've always been a massive, massive fan of a medical drama. When I was a kid, I liked Children's Ward and Angels. When I was a teenager, I watched Casualty. When I was in my 20s, it was obviously Dr. Doug Ross in ER. And then there hasn't really been anything that replaced that. But this year, I decided I would watch Grey's Anatomy. And I had no idea when I started it. It's like 31 series is long, and I mean there's just millions of episodes, and my husband's like, oh my god, are you watching that again? Anyway, I made it to the end, but to cut a long story short, it's about surgeons, so I learned lots of new words about surgery that I didn't know before, and two of the characters are neurosurgeons, and I don't know anything about neurosurgery, and obviously they do these amazing operations, and they developed a reputation for doing operations that nobody else would touch, so that's the sort of shtick. But
It's lucky we filmed it, isn't it?
they take things out of people's brains, but there were lots of episodes where they put things into people's brains, and I didn't know anything about really that. And I started to look up about, neural implants. And the rate of using neural implants is about to grow by 10% by 2028. That market will be worth about 10 billion. Obviously, he who shall not be named is in that with Neuralink. But the list of conditions for which you can put some of these implants in, psychiatric disorders, stroke, motor things, but also heart failure, epilepsy, type 2 diabetes, it just was a really revelatory thing for me to think, actually, in the future, Parkinson's, some of the things we grapple with around the way we use medicines, you might actually be able in the future to put something into somebody's brain, and that will be the treatment as opposed to lifelong medication taking. So a bit of CPD linked to my telly watching and obsession with medical dramas.
Claire, they covered this in The Man with Two Brains film a long, long time ago.
Well, I was going to say Total Recall. Would have been because that's what they implant different memories in you, don't you? And you just have a different kind of you forget about all the rubbish that's going on in your life, and you have this new life. But
how nice! But imagine no more. You don't have to take a drug because something's stuck in your head, and that's the end of that. Yeah. I'm sure it's not that simple.
Listen to the Movers and Shakers podcast if you want to hear people about it that's really happened to. Yeah, Jonathan, go on, give us a fun fact.
I'm a big fan of podcasts like you are, Steve. So I've got a pharmacy fact that I'll tell you after this one. But my two new favourite podcasts of this year that I found, the first one is called Shrink the Box, okay, and it's Ben Bailey-Smith, the comedian, and a psychotherapist called Nemini Metaxas. And what they do is they take characters from famous television shows and they psychoanalyze them. And so they have, like I don't know if anyone watches Schitt's Creek, but Moira from Schitt's Creek is one of the guests on there. And they talk about her. Yes, you can imagine. They do Tony Soprano, they do Tyrion from Game of Thrones and Cersei from Game of Thrones, clearly with her fondness for her brother as being part of the psychological. But it's entertaining, but there's also some interesting sort of psychoanalysis going on there as well, where they talk about all the different psychiatric disorders that are exhibited by television characters that we can all relate to, and then you go, oh yeah, maybe I've got a bit of that
David
as
Brent
well.
And Alan Partridge.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
So that's the first podcast. The other one, because I'm really into my music. I'm a bit of a music nerd. There's a podcast called One Song, and it's an American podcast. And there's these two guys, one guy called Diallo, who's this TV producer guy, and a guy called Luxury, who's a hip-hop singer, I think. And basically what they do is they take a song and they analyse it. They isolate all the different stems in the song. So you'll hear the saxophone on its own, and the drums on its own, and the guitar on its own, and the vocals on its own. And they've done like hundreds of different songs. So they've done like Call Me by Blondie. My favourite, I think, was when they did Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. And they isolate the vocals of Marvin Gaye singing it. And it's like I was listening to it on walking the dog and I had to stop. Because it was one of those things where it just hit me. And the hairs in the back of my neck stuck up. And I started crying. Because it was just beautiful. Again. But it's just brilliant. Again, for people who are into their music and want to know how... And again, the originality of art is another interesting one as well, because a lot of the things have been copied from elsewhere. Like Call Me, the synthesizer in Call Me comes from You Make Me Feel Mighty Real by Sylvester.
Yeah. It's all reimagined, isn't it?
Of it. Yeah, it's brilliant. Anyway, so there we go.
And what's your pharmacy fun fact?
So my pharmacy fun fact, and you probably already know this, but when I've been as part of the jobs one of the jobs I've been doing since I left NICE is teaching GP trainees to help them pass their applied knowledge test to qualify as GPs, and I'm doing this with Neil Maskery, who's been a guest of the pod. You all know,
author of Rebalancing Medicine.
Yeah, and great book this year.
Author of Rebalancing Medicine. Maybe more of that later.
In everybody's stocking this year.
So we do a mock exam with them. And one of the questions that came up in the mock exam was, there's this guy with symptoms of prostatism, and his PSA level is 4, which is at the upper end, and he's on finasteride. And I'm thinking, and the question is, what do you do with this patient? And of course, finasteride suppresses the level of PSA, so you get a false lower level reading of PSA. So if you've got someone who's on finasteride and they've got a borderline PSA, you actually should be referring them for investigation rather than that. And I think I knew that from a while ago, but I'd maybe forgotten it, and it just reminded me. And a lot of the work that I've been doing around this has just reminded me of some of the important clinical stuff that I used to know that I've probably forgotten. But yeah, so finasteride, if you see someone with PSA, think about
you and I have a different definition
level.
of fun, Jonathan.
Yeah. Come on then, Gimmo. Give us your fun pharmacy or medicines fact.
So, what does a pharmacy smell like?
Baby powder.
Okay, what drink does a pharmacy smell like? So, my fun fact is, we all know that Coca-Cola was invented by a pharmacist. Do you know what other drink was invented by a pharmacist?
Yes, I do actually.
Drink?
You're not going to believe this. Look what I've got in front of me. Picked up from when I went to see Clare at Southampton Science Park. And it says Coca-Cola, Pepsi and Dr. Pepper were all invented by pharmacists.
Yeah, there we go. So Dr. Pepper. So Dr. Pepper was invented by pharmacist Charles Alderton in Waco, Texas in 1880. And he was trying to recreate the smell of his pharmacy for some weird reason. And so that's
right.
So that's why, and actually, when you think about it, Dr. Pepper, it does taste a bit cough mixture, doesn't it? So there we go.
Well, do you know what?
I like that.
This is also here's also similar to that then. So I recently came across a community pharmacist called Mike Hewitson, who runs the Abbey Pharmacy in Sherborne and a couple of others. He's a bit of a local legend. He's also a counsellor as well. Anyway, he was telling me that one of the pharmacies that he owns he took over from another pharmacist, and he said, "Oh, have you know all that blood that they use in theatre and on films?" He said, "Well, it's known
Grey's
as
Anatomy."
Well, yeah, exactly. Look at the linkage here. It's called Kensington Gore, which is a pun on the London place and street, was a trademark for fake blood used in films and in theatre. It was manufactured by a retired British pharmacist, John Tyngate, during the 1960s and 70s in the village of Abbotsbury, Dorset. Many varieties of blood have varying degrees of viscosity, shades and textures were available. Since his death, the name Kensington Gore has become the generic term for stage blood and was used in the film The Shining.
There we go.
That's awesome. I bet they got through buckets of that in Grey's Anatomy.
Mike told me that he took the recipe to his grave.
Very good. I wonder if that's what they used in the Harlequins game when they faked the blood injury. In the rugby match.
Oh, what was his name? What was his name?
Richards' job.
Dean Richards. Was it Dean Richards?
Dean Richards was the coach.
Yeah.
Was it Nick?
But yeah.
I can't remember.
The winger.
You're right.
Was it Nick
anyway,
Evans?
so that was my fun fact. Jamie?
Oh, a fun fact. I'll tell you a story then, and it's got lots of fun facts in it, okay? So my story is a short while ago, many months ago, I had a call from somebody in distress. They were throwing out an entire collection of BNFs. And so I said, hold on. I put my pharmacist responding to an emergency tabard on.
You think he hasn't got one, but he has.
I never doubted it.
A green light on the car.
Yeah. And I went
through.
I went straight round. I said, let me through. And I rescued an almost entire collection of BNFs.
Like entire, going back to the beginning.
Well, yeah. So, and that's what started this sort of journey. Really, is that they were going back. It was back to number 2, Clare. So, 1981, the modern BNF, and so it started in 1981, and I grabbed them all, boxed them all up, brought them away, gave them a safe place. Joe wasn't impressed with me bringing boxes and boxes of BNFs. Anyway, a couple of months ago, I took them into work, and I thought, well, these need they need to be displayed somewhere, something like that. So I put them all out, and as I was putting them out, I thought, look at that. That's an entire collection of therapeutics, of knowledge, their iconic design. So then I did a really pharmacy thing, which is very unlike me. I thought, I wonder how much they weigh, because they've grown in size. And so I did some research there, and there's a gentleman called Owen Lyndon Wade who is one of the founding fathers of clinical pharmacology and therapeutics in the UK. The BNFs were found in Penarth, okay, which is where I live. Wade was born in Penarth in 1921 as well. And so he oversaw the modernisation of the 1981 launch of the BNF. So he's one of our early clinical pharmacologists. He was on the BNF committees for years, and he writes a lovely piece about how the BNF came from one of the war formularies. And so the modern BNF as we recognise it now. So I weighed it. So BNF number 1. Okay.
Where'd you get that from, James?
Yeah, so Steve has BNF number 1. So we do have almost a complete set between us, okay?
Taken from University of Manchester, I might add, with permission.
BNF number 1, this is important trivia now, folks, okay? Weighed in at 331 grams and is 15 millimetres thick. Okay?
Like a pamphlet.
Yeah.
Tiny, tiny.
And so BNF number 25, okay, 20 millimetres thick, 464 grams. I'm going to write a blog on this so you can have the full data, so you don't need to get too excited at this point.
Can we get really nerdy at this point? Does anyone know what was special about the 25th BNF, British National Formulary?
Did it have the children's in it or nurses or something?
No. Anyone? It had a silver 25 on the front.
Oh,
it did.
And I own that one.
It did. So I've got them all. BNF 87, look, which is the most recent one that I've got. 88 is out, I understand. Okay. Is 44 millimetres thick and weighs in at a whopping 1.110 kg. Okay, now that is measured on a Salter kitchen scale, so there's a few sort of caveats around that. Okay, but honestly, as I put them all on the shelf, I thought, oh, look at that. And so the history of the BNF is incredible. So I'll write it up properly and we'll put it on our website. Obviously now we've got, and Jonathan's going to come in a moment, we've got the app now, okay? The BNF say that the app saves clinicians between 1 minute and 12 seconds and 8 minutes 46 seconds per prescription compared to manual checking. This represents a time saving to the NHS of over 150,000 clinician hours each month. So that's how we've gone from the BNF to the app. In his 1993 reflection on the birth, the death and the rebirth of the BNF, Wade says that the girth of the BNF hasn't changed much. But actually now we can say it has. And so I'm glad I rescued them. I put my tablet away for another day. So that's my fun trivia fact.
I bet pharmacists are quicker at looking stuff up than other professions, though. I think when you were in your heyday, you knew exactly where you were going. I bet we were faster.
You may well be quicker at looking it up, Claire, but you're still going to be looking up something that's out of date. Because as soon as the BNF gets published...
Oh, you're such a killjoy.
Date, isn't it?
Oh, no. God,
I'm really sorry. Lovely for a bookshelf, but not for up-to-date clinical practice.
I liked it, all right? I liked the book.
What I was going to say about the book, Jamie, so one of my jobs at NICE was to oversee the contract for the BNF, provision of the BNF to the NHS. There's only 2 printers in the whole of Europe who can print the BNF because it requires really thin paper. Yeah, it requires really thin paper that's also really strong. So it has to be the people who print the Bible.
Is that Andrex?
The Bible, yeah. The Bible, yeah.
So it's interesting that back in the day that MIMS was more popular and more common than the BNF, and so that's what they were fighting against when they relaunched it back in 1981. It was designed to go in white coat pockets of junior doctors back in the day, and so
pharmacists.
Yeah, you're not putting a kilo in your pocket now.
Do they still make MIMS? I used to use MIMS.
Yes, they do. So just in case we haven't got any medicine health professionals
listening at this point.
The British National Formulary is we call it the book, but it's really the Bible that has all the medicines that exist in England, and it tells you what it's what you can use it for, license, what the dose is, what the normal side effects. And if you've listened to this podcast, you'll have heard in the past that Jonathan has been very brave and taken on the BNF roulette, which I used to do with my students, where I'd just pick a page and then they'd have to tell me what the drug was and what was wrong with it. And again, we've talked about it before.
Come on, then hit me.
No, I won't put you through that. But I used to have a leather-bound one with that used to change every time it came out. Another fun fact about number 82, right? So if 25 had a silver, 50 had a gold on it. Okay, I'm planning to retire when we get the 100th, by the way, if they're still making it. And the 82nd, does anyone know what was special about the... No,
Well,
sorry,
it was-
the 80th, sorry. What was special about the 80th?
Because 82nd was 40 milliliters thick, I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, what was special about the 80th BNF? It came out between September 2000 and March 2021. That's the clue.
Had a rainbow on it.
It did. It had the NHS Thanks Rainbow.
Very
Where do we
good.
go from there?
Shall we do the
Jonathan, mate, I
paper?
feel
It was
it.
a Five Apothecaries production.
Let's do the paper before I lose the will to live.
No, let's do a quiz. Let's do a quiz of some
Oh,
sort.
God.
How long is the playlist that is actually on Spotify? The Aural Apothecary playlist, which is actually honestly really on Spotify. It stands at what?
Oh,
76?
70 what minutes?
How many?
Oh, I thought you meant how many songs.
Oh, I'll have to accept your first answer.
Okay.
You're
How many
frozen out.
songs are there? Is that what you're going for?
No,
Or
how long is it?
How long it is?
I'm going to say 8 hours.
5 hours, 22 minutes.
6 hours, 17 minutes it stands at. Okay.
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 A great listen as well.
Yeah.
For the
Actually is
festive
on
period.
Spotify.
Yes.
Claire, you're back in the game now. Which Aural Apothecary alumni was recently named a Fellow of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society? And for a bonus question, what was their song choice?
I think I know this. It was... I've forgotten her first name. Asher... no, I can't.
Diane
I can see
Asheru
it.
or Diane
Diane Asher Guru, yeah.
She was
No,
already
she's
a
been a
she was
fellow.
already a
She's
fellow. You're going to have to tell us who the fellow was.
Paul Forsyth hasn't been a guest yet, Steve, has he?
No, you spoke to him at Vienna, didn't you, at the EHP for his desert island drug?
Because he got a fellowship.
Go on,
didn't he?
tell us.
Alison Tennant.
Okay.
And what was her
Yeah,
song
Alison
choice?
Tennant.
She came on and talked about paediatrics, didn't she? She picked something really funky, if I remember.
It was
Something
a kitchen song, wasn't it?
Yeah, something 70s.
Was it I
some
Will
kind of
Survive?
70s disco. Yeah, was it that? Something like
No, it was Shut Up and Dance, Walk the Moon.
Oh,
there you
that?
go.
Ah,
There we go.
not even close.
Okay, so here's a question for you, okay? There's 82 tracks on the Spotify playlist. It's 6 hours, 70 minutes long. Spotify recommends what should come next. Its algorithms have said, after that lot's mashed together, can you name me, in the 10 recommendations, come up with a song that you think would come next? Jonathan?
So the one startling omission from the Spotify playlist is Bruce Springsteen. I think Born to Run is in there as the next.
Do you have it on the screen as we speak, Jonathan?
I
You're
don't.
cheating.
Well, that's very
I
good, because
didn't.
that is the number one pick from the algorithm.
Wow.
I seriously did not cheat
There
on
we
that,
go.
I swear.
There we go.
Did you not? So you didn't pick. You picked. I know you picked
No,
an
you
indie
didn't.
track, didn't you?
No, you picked the
No, I-
undertones, didn't you?
I-
Yeah, that's what I mean. The
I picked the
undertones.
greatest song ever.
Teenage Kicks.
Right. Wow. You picked a book for.
So
Bruce
for any
Springsteen.
future guests of the Aural Apothecary podcast, you need to choose a Bruce Springsteen song.
Yeah,
Unless you get me
okay.
on again.
So any others do you think the algorithm... So Jonathan's right, Born to Run is recommended. Any others based on our eclectic mix? What are the algorithms suggesting to us?
It's another piece of classical music because there's quite a lot of classical on there.
No.
Reggae.
ABBA.
Put us out of our misery, Jamie.
It's recommending some Fleetwood Mac, Go Your Own Way, Mrs. Robinson, Simon and Garfunkel, Don't You, Simple Minds,
Okay.
Boomtown Rats, I Don't Like Mondays, Man on the Moon, R.E.M., Don't Stop, Fleetwood Mac, Got My Mind Set on You, George Harrison, and Give a Little Bit, Supertramp, and then Living Thing, ELO.
So no Richard
that's-
Clayderman.
So No
absolute
played them.
banging tunes, a lot of them.
Yeah,
all
so that's
good,
what we
yeah.
should.
Okay, let me add to that then. Jamie, you can come in on this one then. There are 2 tracks on the Aural Apothecary playlist that were not picked by
Oh,
guests.
yes.
What are they?
Oh,
So
that
they
were picked by
you guys, weren't they?
So The Drugs Don't Work was one of them.
That was Gimmo's.
It's Gimmo's.
No, those are on the list. So we came on to one of them at the live show in Cardiff,
Oh yeah.
Mr. Pharmacist
Mr.
by the Fall.
Pharmacist, yeah.
Okay.
And
very
the
good.
other one,
I know the other one.
asked, go on
Yeah.
then,
It's All the Colours of You, isn't it?
by James.
James.
Because it was about COVID, and I asked if we could have it on because it talked about the COVID, and that's how we'd started, and I thought it was just such a great track.
But there is another anomaly on there as well.
Oh, the episode that never was published.
Yeah, the trial
Is
episode.
there a secret episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Andy Morris, professor at Swansea University.
He came on for our trial episode, didn't he?
So is there a reason that didn't air?
We didn't want it to be career. We didn't want it to be career limiting for. He was just expecting the GPHC to come and inspect his new pharmacy school. That's what.
But he did set the trend though, Jonathan.
Terrific.
He set the trend for indie. He went for Herman Loves Pauline by the Super Furry Animals.
Okay, yeah.
Do you remember?
Good, well
do you remember
spanned.
what? Okay, here's a quiz question then, because actually Andy was fine, Andrew was fine, but the format was all wrong, and that was why we sort of canned it, because we changed the format. Do you remember what our feature was on that episode? If you were to be a drug, what would that drug be? And you had to make up a drug or something.
We did that on an almanac.
Oh,
We did that on the very first Christmas.
I remember doing that.
Yeah,
That's right.
I think also as the micro discussion I talked about the story about Angel's trumpet.
Yeah.
But let's not go there
Never
now.
to be aired. Never to be aired. Okay, another question for you. Listen to this.
Ooh.
Okay.
I know.
And a bit more help.
Tony Avery.
Here he is.
How can I try to explain when I do he turns away again?
So that you are right, Lise. That is Professor Tony Avery who joined us and played his own song. So Tony Avery, I'm taking the bird theme here. Which guest came on?
Have you had a busy day today, James?
And was worried about the Swifts hadn't returned.
Oh,
Which guest came on?
I remember you talking about that. You tried to pretend that you were a bird watcher.
Pretend. And was
Why would
worried that
you do that?
the Swifts were late returning.
And then Gimmo was giving out locomotive engine numbers at the same time. I had to go out.
Oh, the fun never stops with you lot, does it?
I'm surprised you don't know this one.
I don't know who this is.
No idea.
Lucy Pollock.
Right. But can I
Lucy
just
Pollock.
go back to Tony Avery?
You
So
can.
he recommended a book called Demon Copperhead, and I read it, and it was great.
The Aural Apothecary is sponsored by Jamie Hayes Executive Coaching and OneLessPill.com.
Should we do a micro discussion?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, our
here
almanac micro discussion next. Looking at a paper in the British Medical Journal from 1964 by Messrs. Hugh Jones, hyphenated, A.R. Tanser and C. Whitby. Patient's view of admission to a London teaching hospital.
Chris Whitty.
C. Whitby.
Whitby.
What did you make of it?
So I think I'll say what we all said at the beginning, which was that it was funny, isn't it? Because it was a 1964, and it was talking about shared decision making, but actually a lot hasn't changed, has it? I think was what we were thinking. There's a lot in here which is the same, and so I don't know if you want to come in there, Jonathan or Jamie, what you were saying, but the sort of the conversations that were having patients in 1964 could have been had today.
Can I just say, before we say that, just for context, because I always do this,
Yeah,
but I
tell
think
them
it's important for the listener. The methodology is always important. So they surveyed all patients admitted to King's College Hospital, one general medical firm, that's 2 different doctors, physicians, for 6 months between the summer of 1962 up until the end of March 1963. And they thought that 6-month sample would give in a reasonably representative number of patients. And the number actually during that 6 months was 275. And then they collected lots of data about why they were in, how long they stayed in for, how many died, what sorts of reasons were they admitted. And they were an asthma medical research centre as well, so there's quite a lot of respiratory patients. But just for context for the listener.
So the start of the paper, so I laughed when I looked at it because I thought, 1964, I wonder how many of those doctors were women, was one of my first thoughts. But actually the beginning of the paper is, the very first requirement in a hospital is that it should do the sick no harm, and that was a quote from Florence Nightingale.
Yeah.
So I thought actually, and again, resonates with so much of what we're challenged with at the moment about when we send older people in particular into hospital, do we really genuinely always believe that we're not subjecting them to infection and other things going on? So I thought that first bit was quite interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, just some of the other observations around the patients who were admitted as well. So the more things change, the more things stay the same. It talks about 9% of the patients could have been treated in a self-care unit with hotel-type accommodation. These patients were undergoing investigations which did not require close observation. The average length of stay for these patients was 17 days. I hope we're better than that now, but I still see people who you think, should they really be in hospital? And they're in for a long time, because there's nowhere else for them to go, because the social care support isn't there for them. So
that paragraph, Jonathan, starts off with this bed shortage is caused by the high proportion of emergency admissions shown in our figures. So bed shortages, alive and well in 1962-63.
Well, the other thing that's the same, 4 patients contracted antibiotic-resistant staphylococcus, 4 had severe reactions to drugs, 2 developed bed sores, and 1 had persistent pain after physiotherapy. If calf vein thrombosis is considered an iatrogenic illness caused by being confined to bed, then a total of 18 patients suffered potentially serious symptoms. So that could read like something from today, couldn't it?
And did you look at which drugs it was that were included that caused them to be admitted? And do you remember the Rory Kathleen-Jones episode and the medication that his mother
it's not in there, is it?
that his mother took?
I missed that.
When would she have taken it, James?
Barbiturate poisoning, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, Oblivion. Right?
Oblivion.
And what did the directions say?
15 minutes prior to an ordeal.
I should have had one before tonight.
Yeah.
So barbiturates were made up a number of those 4 cases. And interestingly, of those 275, 8% of all of those were suicide attempts in 1964.
the other bit that really, really made me laugh was when they were asking about visiting hours.
Oh, this brilliant. Go for it.
The visiting hours was 7 till 7:30, and there was one man said it was too long.
That was the
Brilliant.
funniest thing in the whole paper.
That'll be me.
So the other thing was nearly half the patients were confused by the multitude of uniforms and different people in white coats, and said they would like to have them wear name labels. Although the majority of the staff at the hospital supported the idea, a large number disliked the idea of having them.
Yes.
Very,
And
very
then
topical.
20 years later, we had Kate Granger.
That's
And,
right. Hello, my name is.
Because people did not introduce themselves to her when she was.
Although I think that wasn't about names. I think
No,
that's
it was about what
their
they were.
profession.
Yeah, it was very topical, that, because I thought it's just what we're into now with physicians associates. The bit I thought was same but different. So there was a bit that described patients not quite understanding their diagnosis, and the way they put that was quite paternalistic. Well, patients haven't understood their diagnosis because we haven't explained it properly. That's a system failure, it's not a patient failure. But I did laugh at the descriptions of the patients, because we wouldn't do this nowadays. So one of them, a 58-year-old clerk of average intelligence, score 50 in the Ravens progressive matrices. And you think, we just wouldn't talk like that now about patients. That's neither here nor there what their IQ score is as to how we kind of manage them. And that has to be a good thing.
Well, Rory Kathleen-Jones is pursuing that at the moment as well, isn't he? He's championing that you don't need to write. I saw this charming and intelligent, 34-year-old
delightful
in
young
clinic
lady.
today. Yes, yeah.
All of that.
The other thing we should just say for the record is that they weren't all medics. There were 3 people on this paper, and one of them was a social worker. And they collected some of the information. The other striking fact, of course, that we all picked up was that all the people who were given who had cancer, guess what percentage of them were actually told that they had cancer? zilch, absolutely none of them. So the world has moved on a lot. And also it sounded like smoking was allowed on the ward. That was the other thing that seemed to be in the paper. And I loved the bit at the end where it said, many found it difficult to conceive of any major shortcomings in the hospital and tried to find excuses for rather than express criticisms of certain faults.
Yeah, I mean, the other one I picked up, which links to the pod really, is noise. And so Jamie Brewster, who sings plays the theme tune and was our guest at our first live show at Cardiff Science Festival last year. Jamie's doing a PhD as an architect. He's doing a PhD, and his PhD is on environment for haematology patients and the design of healthcare and what should be around. And it's based on his own experience when he was admitted with into the haematology ward. The paragraph on noise, that still goes on, and we don't think about it that much, do we? We don't think about it when we're disposing of, clinical waste into bins and slamming them and interrupting all that stuff. So that, again, is
5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
There's a good news story in there. So I think I've got this right. It says the average age of admissions was 51 years old for men and 48 years old for women. So I did a bit of a search, and the average age of admissions for what I think is a similar sort of ward at the moment is 70 to 74. So I think that's probably a good news story in terms of where we come in terms of the health of society.
The other interesting stat, Gimmo, was that 10% of those 275 died during hospital admission. And I looked up some data. Well, it was from 1999, so it's not even close to now, but the death rate then was 8.5%. It's all got really complicated now because they do this, predicted versus actual, because nobody wants to actually say how many people die in hospital. So yeah, that's moved on as well. So that is an improvement.
Thanks all. A big thank you to Clare and Jonathan for returning to the podcast. What should we do? Episode 5 of Series 7 with Dr. Emily Reeve. Emily is a Senior Research Fellow and Deputy Theme Lead for the Centre for Medicines Use and Safety in the Faculty of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences at Monash University in Australia. That will be coming out in the new year. She's also a pharmacist and chair of the Australian Deprescribing Network. You can contact us via Twitter at Aural Apothecary. We're on LinkedIn. Visit the website, theauralapothecary.com. You can email us, auralapothecarypod@gmail.com. Many do. Finally, for this year, on behalf of all the apothecaries, we would like to thank all of our guests that have joined us for this year, for our live audiences in Cardiff and Bordeaux, for taking the time out of your busy lives, for sharing your stories with us and with our listeners. Thank you to the team behind the team at the Aural Apothecary. And finally to you, the listener, for your feedback and interaction, for your views, thoughts, and for your encouragement. However you're choosing to spend the festive season, we would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. You have been listening to a 5 Apothecaries production. Sound engineer, Jimbo Slough. Original music, Jamie Brewster. Artwork by David Baker and Jacob Howard.
Thanks for listening to the Aural Apothecary podcast. It's all about pills, thrills, and bellyaches.
This episode of the Aural Apothecary is sponsored by onelesspill.com, a medicines optimization consultancy.